Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to educating and empowering men to address erectile dysfunction, improve confidence, and enhance the satisfaction in their relationships. This podcast is brought to you by ErectionIQ.com. Learn more at ErectionIQ.com.
Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. I am Mark Goldberg, certified sex therapist. I am deeply passionate about working with men like you to help resolve their ED.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back on the ED Radio Podcast. An interesting topic today, to say the least. We're talking confidence. Of course, it relates back to mental health and psychology, all aspects that are relevant when talking about the mental side of erectile dysfunction. So, Mark, let's open this discussion with me asking you, quite simply, how would you define confidence?
So these are some very big words, and I do feel a little bit hesitant to give a broad strokes definition. I'll share with our listeners how I think about confidence and the concept as it eventually will apply to sexual performance and erectile dysfunction. So I think of confidence as a belief and a trust that a person has in themselves and in their abilities. And I think of confidence in two ways. One of them is the confidence that we portray to the world around us, and the other is the internal feelings that we have within ourselves. And I recognize that many of us have the ability to display a confidence outwardly while we do feel self-doubt or a lower level of confidence internally. So these two experiences may not align, but I do think that both of them are important elements when we are talking about confidence.
Of course, we want to talk sexual performance later in this podcast, but let's just start out by talking about confidence and performance in general. So how does having confidence impact performance?
So the way I think about this is the more confident somebody is in their ability to get something done, to complete a task, to be a good partner, to be a good sexual partner, the less focused they're going to be on performance. So if you know that you know how to complete a task, you're not going to worry as much about how you are going about doing it. And the more confident you feel, the less worry that there's going to be. You know, a way to think about this is if you are flying an airplane. So for the vast majority of our listeners, they probably do not know how to fly an airplane. And they would not feel very confident sitting up in the cockpit of an airplane. Every time the plane bounces up and down, every time it hits a little bit of turbulence, they're going to be very focused on the performance of that plane. They're going to be very focused on whether their perceptions of where the plane is in the sky relative to the ground are correct or not. They're going to be very concerned and very worried. But if you look at a pilot who feels confident in what he or she is doing, they don't worry about the performance. They don't worry about the ups and downs. They're very, very comfortable flying that plane, and they're very, very comfortable in their ability to fly that plane. And they do not worry about the bumps in the road. They do not worry about little mistakes that they might be making along the way because they know that they have the ability to get the plane off the ground, up in the air safely, and back on the ground. So their anxiety hopefully stays very, very level-headed and at a very low level relative to somebody who doesn't have the confidence in their ability to fly a plane.
Confidence, cockiness. You hear a lot about cockiness and confidence, but I want to know, what's the difference? There has to be something different about someone who's cocky versus someone who's confident. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that there's many ways to slice this up. I think what will be helpful for our listeners is the following distinction. I think confidence is when somebody knows and trusts their own ability and also recognizes that outcomes can still end up not being the way that they want. So they know that they can do their best. They know that they have the skills and the ability to get from point A to point B, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they always will succeed in doing that. And even that quote unquote miss or failure doesn't shake their own sense of their ability. Whereas I think somebody who's cocky knows and expects that they're going to be successful. So these two people may have the same ability and they may have the same trust in their ability, but I think a cocky person is also convinced that the outcome will be the way that he or she wants. And I think where this becomes very relevant is things don't always work out the way that we want. I think that's certainly part of life. And without a doubt, when it comes to sexual performance, it's not meant to be perfect all the time. So a confident person who understands that even though they have the ability, generally speaking, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect or even be the way they want it to be all the time. But a cocky person whose expectation is that their ability will always translate into a positive result can actually experience a lot of loss of self-confidence when a sexual experience does not go the way that they want.
How would confidence or a lack thereof cause erectile dysfunction, or at the very least, harm the erection process?
The less confident somebody is, the more they're going to focus on their performance. And hyper-focus on sexual performance induces anxiety, it becomes mind-occupying, and it takes people away from wanting to be present in the sexual experience, from the pleasure involved in the sexual experience, which are really important and key components of gaining and maintaining an erection. So as confidence goes down, I think it's fair to assume that performance focus and performance-based anxiety goes up, which makes it much more difficult to gain and maintain an erection. One other point I would add also about confidence is confidence allows somebody to ride through the ebbs and flows of the sexual process. Erections do wax and wane. They do fluctuate. If a person is hyper-focused on every fluctuation that they might experience, these become signs that are alarming. It quickly activates this lack of self-confidence within somebody, and that in and of itself can set off this cycle of worry and overthinking about what might be happening. Whereas the confident person is confident in their ability, understands this process, and doesn't allow an anxious process to get started. So they can stay pleasure-focused, they can stay where they want to be, and ultimately have the type of sexual experience that they want to have.
What kind of things can harm someone's confidence? And once we lose that confidence, is it possible to get it back?
So I think it's always possible to reestablish confidence. I'll answer the second question first with that. So I want our listeners to be aware that even if confidence has been eroded or it's been rocked by something, I think that establishing confidence, generally speaking, is something that can always be done. Some of the factors I think commonly that contribute to a loss of confidence or a reduction in confidence are, first and foremost, unrealistic expectations. So I'm a big advocate of people having accurate information in terms of what should be happening or what is, quote unquote, within the realm of normal, what should be expected, because I think that, like we mentioned before, that distinction between cockiness and confidence is predicated on having an awareness that even a confident person may not have a perfect outcome. And when you're aware that that's part of engaging in partnered sexual activity, but even in solo sexual activity, is that things are not going to be perfect, I think that helps to maintain confidence. Another thing that erodes confidence are perceived failed experiences or negative experiences. This can happen both individually, but I think more commonly happens in partnered sexual activity. So if a person has, from their perspective, a number of failed experiences or even one very significant, quote unquote, failed experience, this can leave a pretty significant mark and help to erode confidence. Lastly, I'll mention that I think that all these things really lead to a system of negative beliefs about oneself. And I think that system, or those core beliefs, as sometimes I refer to them, about oneself, can really set the course for a more generalized lack of confidence that a man can experience in this realm.
How can the way a man interacts and communicates with their sexual partner impact confidence?
So I would look at this from two angles. I think one of them is a partner's reactivity, like we mentioned before, to a sexual encounter, what their expectations are, how they voice that to the man that they're with. I think that can have a pronounced impact on confidence. And on the flip side, I think a man's expectations of his partner can also erode confidence. To get a little bit more specific, if a man has expectations that his partner is going to be interested in sexual activity at whatever frequency, let's say 3 times a day, just to take it to a little bit of an extreme, and he sees that he or she is just not as interested as he would expect, if he internalizes this and he says, well, it must be because of me, his expectations are a big part of what leads to feeling this lack of confidence. Now, if there's a different way to talk to his partner and communicate, and to really learn about, well, what do they like? What are their preferences? How often do they feel like they want to engage in sexual activity? If there is that open communication, resetting those expectations to something more realistic and not internalizing them, that the reason why a partner is not reacting or responding in the desired way is not because of him, but it's has a lot to do with just who this person is. Not that that's a problem, but having, again, a realistic expectation of your partner can make a big difference in terms of a general sense of confidence.
Do you want to leave us with any parting words before we wrap up today's interview?
So what I think I would want to just add is there is a lot of self-doubt, at least in my experience of meeting with many, many men over the years. When it comes to sexual performance in particular, I think expectations have been set very high, and I think that there are way more people who lack confidence in the bedroom than is justified. Many men are going to experience self-doubt at times. I think that's normal. When that becomes something that is very pronounced, when you're preoccupied with it, when you're entering into every sexual encounter with those doubts running through your mind, one is, I want you to know that you're not alone. 2, you're probably misjudging yourself relative to whatever expectations you've built up in your mind. And 3, there are ways to do this a whole lot better. So I think any man who's experiencing struggles with confidence should not hesitate to address those challenges, either with their partner that they're with, or doing some work with a professional to get to the bottom of that lack of self-confidence and to really bolster a sense of not cockiness, but confidence in one's ability and what they can bring to a relationship and to a sexual encounter.
Thanks for listening to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. For more information on today's topic and understanding how the mind impacts erectile dysfunction, please visit erectioniq.com. That's erectioniq.com.